Before responding as a EU ambassador, I would respond as a specialist of international relations.
Yes.
What is foreign policy? It is basically managing relations with other nations or with other forces, groups that are outside, in this case, the island. So that's foreign policy, managing that. And what is essential in foreign policy? Obviously, one could list resources, wealth, power, history. But if we look at the roots of all that, we have to say that it's geography and demographics. So if we look at geography and demographics,
Yes.
it is the most natural thing to have an Asia-centric foreign policy. You have to manage the relations between big regional powers, the big country. Geography is the study of the countries, but also the people and the relationship with their environment. And demographics, I think that in terms of demographics, neither India nor China can be beaten by many countries.
Yeah.
So, totally normal to have an Asia-centric foreign policy. But that is not at all incompatible with good relations with the EU. It's even quite conducive. Why? Because first of all, Asia-centric means that you want to reinforce regional links. And we in the EU are always in favor of reinforcing regional trade, regional relations. Why? Because we think that it's conducive to peace. So the more people want to reinforce their regional environment, the better it is. Second, we as the EU have actually strong relations with big partners in Asia. There are not many countries that can say that they have very deep relations with both India and China. And that means that we are among the few ones that can work alongside with Sri Lanka to ensure that, as Sri Lanka puts it, there's an equidistant policy that is conducive to peace in the Indian Ocean. So, we are ideal partners in that because we have both a strong legitimacy. And then Sri Lanka can and will have an Asia-centric foreign policy, and that's not at all to the detriment of what the EU offers. And the EU is important. We are for trade, for tourism, for cooperation in development, for foreign direct investment. We are either number one or number two of the partner of Sri Lanka. And that is not at all incompatible with Asia-centric. So we see this as a strength for a relationship. So, first of all, I think that any visitor, not only Europeans, who come to the island, is convinced of the potential of Sri Lanka. First of all, an island is born to trade. You have a fantastic port whose capacity could be expanded. At the moment, it's 75% of its volume is transshipment to India, from India. There could be a diversification, there could be more European activity there. But more than that, you have standards. And the EU is a kind of superpower of standards. If you can export to the EU, you can export to many more countries. Because for social standards, there's not much child labor or exploitation in Sri Lanka. For environmental standards, which will be even more important in the future, Sri Lanka is pretty good. So the potential is there. But at the same time, there is facilitation through the GSP+, but this could be increased. At the moment, the use rate of GSP+ is about 60%. And by having more added value in the country, you could grow that. In Bangladesh, the rate of use is about 90%. So that's one thing. The second thing is to have a trade policy that is more conducive to imports, exports. It's very good that Sri Lanka wants to export more, but it's going to be very delicate to explain to European traders that Sri Lanka just wants to have export but no imports from the EU. This is tenable when there's a foreign currency crisis, as it is, for a limited period of time. But if this extends, over and over, then it will be difficult to convince European operators to still import if they know that no export is possible. Yes, so in 2019,
Yes.
in July, Sri Lanka became an upper middle income country,
Yes.
just above the limit of $4,000 per capita.
Yeah.
But this year, because the economy in 2019 didn't do so well, it was back below that threshold. What does it mean? That means that at least now for more than 3 years, Sri Lanka, provided it fulfills all the conditions of GSP Plus in terms of implementation of international conventions, will continue to have access to the EU at 0% tariff rate for 2/3 of its customs line. And then we see next year, if next year, which most likely with the contraction of this year or the difficult situation, it's likely. So, for example, if in 21 Sri Lanka is still a lower middle income country, that means that for at least 22, 23, 24, it has access to GSP plus. But the caveats are one, to keep implementing these international conventions and standards. Second, the EU will have a new legislative instrument on GSP plus in a couple of years. So we have to see also how this new instrument will be shaped. Well, I think that for anyone to be an island in the Indian Ocean is quite an obvious geostrategic position. And if you look at a big map of the world, it's really unique to have an island where there's nothing under until the South Pole, but where you are next to a big mass that is making fantastic economic progress, although at the moment the situation is difficult. But to just put this in figures, which country other than Sri Lanka has about 60,000 ships going south of its most southern point, Dontra Point, and which other country have that many ships carrying 2/3 of the world oil, and which other country has that many ships that carry 50% of the trade of global trade? It's only one country that has all that and without neighbors next to it. And for us Europeans, it's very important because we are the biggest consumers market in the world and the one that is the most exposed to international trade. So, a lot of our imports, like in Sri Lanka, comes from China, and all the trade from China comes south of Sri Lanka. So it is very important. And if you look at Colombo as a port, 75% of its transshipment is from India, and at the same time, half of the trade from the other big regional power is closed. So Sri Lanka is a unique position to manage relations between those big powers. And what we particularly appreciate is that it's using its geostrategic position to foster regional integration. Sri Lanka is active in SAARC, in BIMSTEC, is really one of the pioneers of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. And we really welcome that because for us it's a factor that can reinforce stability and peace. And we really hope that this will generate more rule-based order. We prefer much more that because it's a project for peace than a survival of the fittest, where the strongest has the upper hand. So, as I said, for us, what is the most important is to make sure that all the big powers who have an interest in the Indian Ocean accept the same rules that are conducive to peace. So for us, this is the number one priority. How do we contribute to that? We contribute to that by first practical initiatives, such as reinforce the common fight against piracy, exchange information, encourage transparency, and then discuss international rules that can be applied by all. And here again, I think that the EU and Sri Lanka have a strong legitimate approach in fostering rules, because we don't have the navies as EU. Member States is different, but EU doesn't have a navy force that would compete with the Indian Navy or with the Chinese Navy. We are all in favor of ensuring that people respect the rules so that our trade can continue and generate added value for all our citizens. A couple of precision. If sometimes diplomats have interest in being blurry, but in this case I would really be precise. First of all, the resolution still stands. Sri Lanka has withdrawn from the co-sponsorship, but the resolution in the United Nations still stands and will be discussed next March 2021. So there will be an evaluation of the implementation of this resolution and discussion among the international community or members of the United Nations. So the resolution stands. The main issue of this resolution is about reconciliation. And reconciliation has not been shelved by the government. What the government has done is to say that this has to be owned by the population. We have a mandate from the electorate, and we want to have a process that is owned by the people. That's why we withdraw from the co-sponsorship, and we will propose another reconciliation process or another definition. I think that this resolution was useful to give a benchmark of the engagement of the international community with Sri Lanka in terms of reconciliation. But where the EU stands by this, but you say we are the main lobby group or the main. So you have a core group where you have Germany and EU member states, and then you have Canada, you have UK, Albania, Montenegro. If I'm correct. So we have one member states, and we are 27 member states among the 193 members of the United Nations. So we totally stand by, but I don't think it's accurate to say that we are the main movers and the main shapers. We stand by and we participate. Now the impact, the fundamental point of your question. It depends really on what the government will propose. The government committed itself to pursue reconciliation. So we obviously we continue to call for a sustainable reconciliation process, and we are waiting to hear from the government its plans and how it wants to continue to engage with the UN and the international community in this regard. We've had a fruitful meeting with a reciprocal wish to engage. We've had a very unique period over the last few months with the COVID. In Europe, we're still in the midst of the pandemics. Sri Lanka is done much better. And now we just had the elections on the 5th of August. So what we are doing now is as EU, we are taking contact with the ministers and programming how we can institutionally meet and discuss detail of our cooperation, be it our development cooperation on the climate change, but also the ideas of the government on reconciliation. Well, it is your assessment that the previous government's lack of popularity or loss at the elections stems from the co-sponsorship of the resolution. But that's your view, but you cannot ask me
Yes.
to share that view like that. I was not here, and it's part of
Yes.
your own assessment. So I would not focus on that. The new government says that it has a strong mandate from the electorate. It has one with 2/3 of majority. So we are keen to discuss with the government and understand how they will use this legitimacy for the reconciliation process, but also to implement international commitments. But the fundamental point is that we don't see an incompatibility between Sri Lanka international commitments and its victory of 2/3 at the recent polls. We don't see that as incompatible.
Yes.
So overall, the cooperation has been long, broad, and deep. So long, it started formally in '95 with the opening of the EU delegation. And I would start by a figure. It's basically almost €1 billion that has been spent in Sri Lanka by the EU, so with taxpayers' money, the EU taxpayers. 1 billion, so at this rate of exchange rate, almost 220 billion rupees. And it's all grants, no loans, no conditionality. It has all been grants. And why such a huge amount? Because for a country of 22 million inhabitants, 1 billion over 25 years is big. Especially Sri Lanka is not poor, it's a middle-income country. Why so much? Because I think that the international community, including the EU, has a lot of admiration for the resilience of Sri Lanka, which went through internal troubles, 70s, 80s, 90s, civil war, tsunami, Easter attacks, and now COVID, like the rest of the world. And every time Sri Lanka stood up and managed to recover and to have economic growth with a very good human development index. So I think that donors feel that the money is put to a good use and that Sri Lanka's resilience deserve to be accompanied. So first, figures. Second, which big sectors are we working on at the moment? So rather to give you a technocratic, one focus is agricultural development. Another is post-war rehabilitation and reconciliation in East London. On agricultural development, which has been almost 2/3 of our money, for 2014 to 2020, it was €200 million. So what we do is many things, but basically we want to empower agriculture's farmers by making sure that they get the best price for their products, and we want the best product. So for example, we've worked very hard to try to make cinnamon from Sri Lanka as a geographic indication. What is a geographic indication? Cinnamon from it's Ceylon or Ceylon cinnamon.
Like Ceylon tea.
So for example, if you take some bubbly, let's say it's €7 in the supermarket. If it's champagne, because it is produced in the region called Champagne in Europe, then it's €30. You give a premium to a product because it comes from a place where all the products from this region are better. And so, for example, in Europe, we import more cinnamon from Vietnam than from Sri Lanka, whereas cinnamon from Sri Lanka is much better. How do you make sure that the Sri Lankan farmer gets more money because its cinnamon is better? Geographic indication. So we've worked to have this recognized and brings more added value. But we're also making sure that we are building huge cool rooms so that there's less waste for the vegetables and the fruits. That we have a more transparent price platform where data that are very important are shared on the web. So more transparency so that there's more profit for the farmer. So we're doing lots of things like that. In the East and the North, post-war, we're doing a lot of psychological counseling, how you rehabilitate, we are doing demining, we are doing support for the widows. So we're doing lots of social actions. So let's give you an example.
Yeah.
Now, very recently, we reallocated 22 million euro as a response for crisis. And it's again in the agricultural sector, but also in the tourism sector and in the health sector with WHO. So we were the first one to move, and we gave the biggest amount as, Europe. Obviously, World Bank had bigger needs, but in terms of bilateral, we were. And for the future, we would also very much like to focus on the fight against climate change and the sustainability of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is very exposed, very vulnerable to climate change.
Yes.
And we would like to work very much in that. Also on water, because we feel that it's essential in Sri Lanka. And we are putting together a proposal for the next 7 years. Well, Sri Lanka has the lowest death rate per capita in the world. It is among the best with Tanzania and Vietnam, but I think that today Sri Lanka is the best. So what can I say? When you're in the country that is the best, you can say that it's like the '96 Cricket World Cup, or that is like being on top of the world. No. Now, seriously, we have a lot of admiration. All citizens in Europe would not be able to do like the Sri Lankans. We don't have the same discipline or resilience, or perhaps we love our individual freedom so much that we are ready to run more risks. But the result is that our death rate per capita is higher. So we can only, from that point of view, we can only learn from Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka is this big asset that is a healthy environment. Now it is reopening the economy, and the big challenge will be how to interact with the outside world. As long as the island remains an island, it is fine. We are confident that combination of technology, intense testing, and good procedures, Sri Lanka can manage to restart its tourism industry and its interaction with the rest of the world. But obviously it will be very difficult because the rest of the world has not been as good as Sri Lanka, and that will be for Sri Lanka to manage.